Welcome. My name is Amy Abel. I'm the Managing Director here at the Conference Board for Human Capital. I'm delighted that you have chosen to join us today for this very intriguing webcast that we will have. I'm very excited to present to you this topic, the role of technology in coaching. And I have an esteemed panel with me that we can explore this intriguing and new topic. Many of you may think, as I probably have thought, technology in coaching? Isn't that an oxymoron? What does that mean? What does that mean to our practice in coaching? What does that mean for our leaders in our organization? And how can we think a little bit more about our current day as well as our future for coaching and the role of technology in coaching? So we're going to spend the next 60 minutes or so on this webcast to explore that. But before I start and dig into the content, let me remind you of our credits. We do offer HRCI, SHRM, CCE, and CPE credits. So if you would just follow the instructions on your screen, you could just sort of type in your name and specify the type of credit that you want, and we'll be sure that you get the credit that you need. And before we do that, before we jump into the content, let me introduce to you my panel. I'm completely over the moon as to the great mind share and the thought leadership on this panel. Let me first introduce Alex Pascal, the founder and CEO of Coachlogix. Alex is obviously the founder of Coachlogix, a leading technology platform specializing in coaching. He's an experienced coach himself and has coached hundreds of executives from different organizations like Samsung, Mercedes-Benz, Activision, the Federal Reserve Bank, U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, amongst many, many others. And he holds a PhD in consulting psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology. So thank you, Alex, for joining me in the studio today.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And I also have online from the East Coast, Allison Tom, who is the Senior Learning Portfolio Manager from McKinsey & Company. She's held multiple roles in her 18 years at McKinsey, with most of her time in learning and development. She is the creator of the Coach Now program that we will talk about on this webcast. Blending technology and coaching, I think you'll be very intrigued to hear about this new initiative that Allison has driven. She has a master's degree in counseling organizational psychology from Columbia University. And finally, but not the least, of course, is David Peterson, who is the Director and Center of Expertise of Leadership Development and Executive Coaching at Google. As a well-renowned thought leader in this area, he serves on the advisory boards of Coachlogix and Executive Development Associates, as well as a senior advisor for the Institute of Contemporary Leadership and 7 Paths Forward. I think David is part of a lot of different organizations that we all would like to learn from his knowledge, including SIOP, the Society for Consulting of Psychology, and the Harvard Institute of Coaching. And his doctorate is in counseling and industrial org psych from the University of Minnesota. So thank you, David and Allison. Apologies, I didn't jump to Allison to say thank you from the East Coast and from the West Coast. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us. I'm glad to be joining you here from San Francisco.
So we're very CNN today. You know, we've got a multiple coasts and we've got the studio in New York. I think it provides an excellent perspective from different views, and maybe we'll just start and jump into that. Let me start with Alex. You know, why are we talking about technology and coaching? What's going on in this space? What are some evolving trends that our audience should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, coaching really developed over the last 20 or 30 years or so, where we started thinking about coaching in the workplace. At the same time, we've seen tremendous change in the way we think about technology and how technology has really impacted virtually every industry. I do think that coaching's been slow to react to technological changes, so we haven't seen too much innovation using technology and coaching so far. You'd be surprised that some of the Fortune 500 companies that I talk to, they use spreadsheets to manage their coaching practices. So, you know, you're managing multi-million-dollar coaching budgets and you really don't know exactly what's going on. You're perhaps not leveraging technology as much as you could. But over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen really the development of the use of technology in coaching, even VC funding coming into the coaching space, things we haven't really seen before. And there's really a number of different applications where technology is valuable for coaching. So starting with the basics, how do you transition from a spreadsheet to something more dynamic that allows you to gather better data around your coaching practice, that allows you to better match a coach with someone in an organization that perhaps is a candidate for coaching? How do you go about understanding, which kind of coach and which kind of profile would be a good fit for a specific person? Are you looking for coaches with certain areas of expertise? And we do this without technology today, and we've been doing it for a long time, and that's really the human component within managing a coaching practice, knowing your coaches, knowing how you can leverage certain people's expertise to help other people develop. But technology can certainly play a role as we develop more and more advanced platforms that allow you to understand which people could potentially help others, how long they should work together, should they use certain assessments, should they avoid certain assessments. And that's really when you start getting into that machine learning and AI component that could be very powerful moving forward.
So moving into just that thought that machine learning and AI can help you make better informed decisions is what you're saying, that the technology can help you with that in actual putting forth the coaching effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know David is really one of the world's experts in that area. So it'll be interesting to hear from him on that. And when you start thinking about, where does that data come from? Well, it starts also coming from start to not use spreadsheets to manage all that coaching. So, how do you schedule sessions? How do you get feedback from the people that are receiving coaching? How do you get feedback from the coaching practice leaders on how a certain coaching engagement went? What do the coaches think about how their coachee is progressing? Are you asking some of the people around that person that's receiving coaching how they're improving across different goals? Are you able to cascade all that data in a way that allows you to really get analytics around, what's happening within your coaching practice, within your organization, and starting to really use that data to create better decisions, and at some point even having very advanced machine learning and AI that can allow you to make even better decisions around coaching, which will make coaching even more of a strategic component in organizations.
Right. So let me pause and sort of go to Allison first, and then I'll go to David, is sort of the bigger picture. I know we'll be hearing a little bit more about how you implement the technology in the program Coach Now at McKinsey, but sort of your bigger views on what's going on around technology and coaching. Why all of us, well, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, but why is there more an increased focus of attention on some of this? Obviously for some of the issues and challenges that Alex already spoke about, but sort of some of your thoughts, if you don't mind.
Sure. And I think that this will get into a bit around, what the needs that we had when we came up with our concept of Coach Now, which is a digitally enabled sort of program that offers coaching to our people at the moment, or sort of as close to the moment of need as possible. And what we saw was, the world is changing. It's much more complex. Things are happening quickly. People need to learn and grow and develop at a much faster pace. And so we looked to technology to say, how could we actually use that to support our people, to bring this human element of coaching to them as effectively and easily as possible.
That's great. Perfect. And David, your thoughts on sort of the bigger picture around this challenge or topic?
So clearly, technology is going to be driving a lot of changes that we're seeing. But it's not just artificial intelligence. There are apps, tools, online resources, sensory devices like the ability to see things and get immediate feedback, bio measurements, those kinds of things will certainly be shifting the capabilities that people are relying on, and will start to replace some of the things that coaches do now and take for granted. So that's going to be a huge driver of the change. But I also want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are changing that are not driven by technology that are shaping the future of coaching. So the technology is likely to be the biggest and most dramatic, but I see some other things happening as well. So leaders are just getting better at self-directed development. they are better at learning themselves. So there's a little bit of a diminished need for a coach to come in and help me. Lots of other people are learning coaching skills. So human resources, peers, your manager. So they're able to get some of that coaching from other people. And again, diminishing the reliance on external coaches or internal coaches. And third, I think most dramatically, which really doesn't get a lot of attention, is the fact that the nature of leadership and the nature of organizations themselves are starting to change. And so people will require different things from their coaching and development processes. So I think there's a lot of things going on together that in tandem are going to lead to a very significant shift in coaching.
You know, the three of you actually perfectly summarize the complexity that's going on. It's actually perfect because what I'm hearing is, you know, there's changes in our business, right? There's changes in our leaders that are needed. There's changes in the way we approach leadership development, which, you know, pushes, you know, what Allison was referring to. We needed, you know, development at the right time of training, or how do we access it faster, better, smoother, you know, and it's impacting all of those things. And of course, the management of training, right? The management of coaching is ever more critical because, you know, companies want to know, you know, how are you doing this, and how much are you doing this with, and how are you doing it more effectively, more efficiently, right? So all of these components, whether it's the need of the leadership, the changes of leadership, the management of coaching, all of that can be enhanced by technology. So actually that was really well summarized from that, which is terrific. There's just clearly a lot going on for our organizations to think about. And those of you that are tuning in that are managing your coaching initiatives or are thinking about how you do the coaching work in your organization, is something to reflect on. And by the way, I forgot to invite the audience. Please join us in this conversation. You can ask questions of our panel by typing in questions in the lower left-hand corner. So please do that as we continue to speak, and I will see the questions and turn the questions over to our panel and I'll respond. So please join us in this conversation. So, okay, let's shift a little bit more, and we'll come back to this as we continue to have this conversation, because I think it'll, some of the things that I'm thinking about is like, you know, who's doing it and how are they doing it and what are they doing? So these are some of the questions that are going on in my mind, but I think they'll come out as we continue to talk. Let's ask David for another, I think, another intriguing element of this conversation around technology and coaching, the human element versus artificial intelligence. Right? Many of us in coaching are like, you can't use technology in coaching. Right? This is a person-to-person conversation. How can this be? How can we, you know, are you telling me we're going to be replaced by chatbots or something? Or, you know, some machine robot that's coming in that will be my coach? Is that what we're thinking of? So I'd definitely love to hear your thought, and as well as obviously the rest of the panel. How do you differentiate the parts of coaching that are uniquely human versus the parts that technology can help us with? Please.
So if you think about coaching similar to the way you just defined it, a conversation between two people, and I would add for the purpose of developing the leader, almost every aspect of that is likely to change over the long term. So it may not be two people, it may not be two people, and it may not be a conversation. So the real-time coaching, the technology that's readily available is going to start to shift that dynamic. And I'll say a little bit more about where this is coming from. But big picture, I see near-term almost a golden age of coaching. The complexity that we were just talking about, the constant change, people need our help right now, making sense of this, sorting things out, figuring what they're going to do. So there's a huge increase coming, I think, in the demand for coaching. And it's going to be seductive in the sense that longer term, I really believe the technology and all these other changes we've talked about are going to lead to a very serious disruption that will completely change the nature of coaching. So in that medium term is where a lot of what I'm focused on and some of the trends that I'm talking about are going to be most important. So how coaches adapt during this transition period in between. So, you know, I like to think about what can coaches do better than machines, and what can machines do better than humans? And so I want to walk through just a couple of those things. So we can automate almost any kind of repetitive task, something that is mechanical. You can just code that, and have something available for people. Second, just the availability. Machines, computers, technology, it is always there. It is eminently non-judgmental. So, coaches will react. Your machines can listen to you without judgment, always on, always available. You wake up in the middle of the night and have a question or a thought you want to process, the AI will be there for you when you want it. So there's a number of things that machines can do better here. What's interesting to me is that many of the things that coaches say provide the greatest value in coaching, asking powerful questions, the caring and the human element, the relationship itself, some of those are going to be shifting too. So the asking powerful questions, that's pretty routine. And pretty soon, artificial intelligence will be able to ask many of the coaching questions that people think are so powerful. Ray Kurzweil thinks that in about less than 15 years, artificial intelligence will have developed human consciousness and the ability to project empathy. So that's the long-term disruption that I'm talking about. There's even a thing called artificial empathy. So just like artificial intelligence, AI, there's artificial empathy that people are working on right now. So artificial intelligence, avatars, robots can recognize emotions, read human faces actually better than humans can. They're more accurate in identifying the emotions that people are feeling based on their eye contact, their reactions to things. That ability to cognitively empathize, to be able to recognize and label the emotion and actually feed it back in a kind of active listening. Artificial intelligence is coming along very quickly there. Actually feeling emotion, actually sharing emotion, those things are much farther away, but they're still coming. So, Amy, I'll just stop right there. I've got more thoughts on what humans can do better, but just want to see if you had any questions or reactions to that.
Sure. Actually, let me turn it over to Alex first, if you don't mind. Sort of either your reactions to what Dave is saying or your own thoughts, and to complement that.
Yeah, no, I think David is spot on, and I think what's going to be interesting for coaches and coaching in general is really that medium term. How can coaches leverage technologies, and which types of technologies can be leveraged by coaches to become better coaches? And I mean, to David's point, a lot of the elements that coaches think are powerful, perhaps they are, perhaps they're replicable by technology that is not even that advanced, perhaps technology that we have today. But in the medium term, I see the possibility of technology really augmenting coaches' ability to create real impact and to measure whether that impact is as impactful as coaches or perhaps people running coaching practice in organizations think they are. So that's going to be interesting. And David mentioned a kind of 15-year kind of time frame for starting to see some things that sound like science fiction.
Which, by the way, to me, 15 years is not really long term. I mean, 15 years is pretty fast.
Yeah, that's
I'm just saying. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's things are progressive and accelerating at a faster and faster pace with this emergence of this complexity in the world driven by technology and driven by this globalization that we've seen that has many, many facets. And again, one of them being just the exponential growth that happens when everything's more interconnected. But when you think about, let's say, 100 years, most experts in the field of artificial intelligence think that we will have human-level machine intelligence, which will not only redefine coaching, it will redefine the world. So one of the things that we can do as practitioners is start compressing that timeline and thinking about the next 5 years, the next 10 years. What are some of the technologies that you're seeing emerge across different spaces, and really start thinking about how that could be applied to coaching. One of the things that I see coaches not necessarily being very good at is just the whole nature of complexity, how you deal with complexity, how you deal with complex issues. And those are a lot of the issues that people in organizations are facing today. So from my perspective, dealing with complexity, even going outside just the technology conversation, dealing with complexity is something that coaches can definitely get much better at. And again, in our world, that's definitely going to have a tremendous technology component to it as well. Understanding it, using it, and also thinking about what are some of the impacts that you think that technology will have in the field of coaching and in general as the world keeps getting more complex.
So I completely agree. And just as a follow-up question, when you say that you see a lot of coaches struggling with complexity, is it that they can't handle or understand the change themselves, or they don't fully embrace it to figure out how they can take advantage of it? Can you explore that a little bit further?
So first of all, there's a lot of different coaches, a lot of different types of coaches, and some of them are very well versed with the topic of complexity, how complexity emerges in conversations with people that work in complex environments. But some coaches also are more kind of humanistically driven, where they care about those powerful questions that David mentioned, and there is incredible innate power in that. But sometimes we tend to rely on our strengths and not pay too much attention to other shifting trends where we perhaps feel a little uncomfortable. And the topic of complexity, by its nature, makes people uncomfortable. So I think that most coaches have not leaned into that discomfort and really explored to understand what is the topic of complexity, what does it entail, and how does it come into the fold in the day-to-day experience of executives as you're working with them.
Yeah, terrific. Yes, perfect. And very quickly, I see some questions coming in from the audience, and I'll get to you in a second, so thank you for that, and please continue to write in questions. I was going to lastly turn to Allison for your thoughts on sort of, coaching and artificial intelligence, the human element. What are your sort of thoughts on some of that?
Well, I think it's fascinating, and I think it's something that we could envision, in the future. And is it 2 years down the road or 15 years down the road? I'm not sure. But, right now, I think that where Alex was going in the medium term is saying, in terms of trying to manage the complexity and the fast pace of our world and what everyone, our colleagues, are expected to, handle day to day, is how we can use technology to actually bring the human element in. And that's sort of where we have gone with our program, which I'll share more about later. But really saying what can we use to create ease of access and make sure that people are getting to that coach. And I think one of the things we also did that was different is, rather than coaching being this sort of long-term, over time relationship with a coach, we actually said, could we condense it? Could we make it an hour of coaching that you do virtually, by phone or VC? And I think that was a real change and a difference as well, just to see, could the coaching have the impact that we wanted it to have in this shorter, sort of more condensed interaction?
Yeah, no, terrific. I think all of these perspectives are, I don't know if the audience or I'm sort of absorbing some of the comments that all of you are saying, and it's, they're pretty powerful statements. David, you actually said asking questions is routine. Do you know what kind of dramatic statement that is, right? That is against everything we could possibly imagine about asking questions. But I actually, I agree. There is a certain amount of routine in some of the types of questions that we might ask in coaching. Right, but I would say it's very contrary to what others might think of when you think of asking questions, right? But and the fact that it is routine, or potentially, which could then be inserted, right, with technology and complementing. And I'm, really struck also by some of the thoughts, that you had around the golden age of coaching coming. But it's whether we as coaches and as practitioners in our companies can sort of handle the disruption and adapt with the disruption to sort of see the golden age of coaching. I think that would be very intriguing to see what comes upon it. Okay, we're getting a ton of questions here. So thank you for the audience. We have...
Amy, if it's okay,
please.
let me come back and finish the positive side of what I think humans can do better.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I think, you can find lists of powerful questions online or in books. And when I ask coaches, what powerful questions do you ask your clients? And they rattle them off. I thought a robot can do that. What is harder is knowing when to push and say, let me ask that same question again, so to get to deeper meaning. So what humans can really do better now is things related to deeper meaning, a sense of purpose, deeper values. So getting people to pause and reflect more deeply, because you know which part of the question to push, when to repeat, when to ask a different question, and especially around meaning, purpose, principles, values, and ethics. So that's where coaches, I believe, have to really get better to add greater value. Another place is around complexity, as Alex was saying, organizational dynamics, politics, the nuances of driving large-scale organizational change. These are really complex systems, and there's a matter of judgment here, helping people think this through, asking questions, offering suggestions, try nudging here, what about this? So really thinking about the complexity of the system and driving change, being able to step up on the balcony and see the bigger picture, see the system in which the leader is operating. So those are the kinds of things that really require more experience, more judgment, more wisdom, more perspective that I think coaches can bring from the human perspective. And the last truly human element that will take a long time to replace artificially is, to me, surprise, playfulness, a sense of humor. So using those kinds of tools, being playful, experimental, doing things that are not predictable, that's where humans really have a unique edge right now.
Terrific. No, really good thoughts, and how can perhaps we be more playful? I think that's a good challenge to toss out there. So let's take a couple of questions and then we'll continue with our program. And this is in no particular order. One of the questions is, so do you think we'll all get to the point where everyone will have their own avatar coach? Any guesses? And let me make it harder. Do you think that's in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years?
I think it's 20 years. And, Amy, you said earlier that 15 years seems too soon. One of the things that Ray Kurzweil talks about in terms of exponential pace of change is that at today's rate, 40 years of advancement and change is going to happen in 12 years. And so 12 years from now, if we're just projecting linearly, we'd say, oh, that's 40 years away. But as technology advances more quickly, it's actually just 12 years away. So many of these things will be available in 15 years. I think the rate of adoption, the rate of disseminating them, mass development of these is probably 20 years away before it be widely adopted and present in people's lives.
Right. No, I hear you, and that pace of change and the speed, it still strikes me, but I completely understand. So basically, we all should start counting in dog years, is what we're saying, because it'll just advance exponentially really quickly. It'll be here before you know it, or at least that's the way I would feel.
One more thing about the avatar is it's also it's dependent on how you define that avatar. For some people, they'd be very comfortable having a coach that is it's almost like very chatbot-like, but it asks good questions. It allows them to reflect on a continuous basis. Maybe randomly pops up a question every month. There's 3 times in a random interval where a question gets asked, and that starts creating these relationships between human and machine, human and chatbot. So that avatar depends on how you define it. It might be here way sooner than 20 years. Yes. But I think the way we're looking at it 20 years down the line, and what David was describing, is definitely something that would potentially fully replace having an actual coach. So I think it's something interesting for the audience as well, as to think about what is their level of comfort with using some technology to replace some of the components that they would expect in a coach today. And then that starts defining what ultimately coaching and technology kind of create together and what we'll have in 20 years.
So, and just to build on that point, I was working with an organization recently, which is exactly what they've already are doing today. So it's not 20 years, or at least a simple version of what you were just talking about. Right now, they can have an application where, with AI in the background, artificial intelligence in the background, the email will come to the manager, and it will be, sort of simple-looking emails. Hey, your employee hasn't taken vacation in 6 months. Maybe you should have a coaching conversation. or they haven't done any training, or they haven't done something that might be just a reminder to the manager that they need to have a coaching conversation with their employee. And it doesn't sound that complex, but actually behind that is quite a complex, where it looks at a gazillion points of data to bring about a coaching conversation to this manager. As a manager, I would think, wow, that's actually pretty helpful. That's actually intriguing.
Right.
But it's actually not just some automatic system. It's actually an AI thinking around that.
That's wonderful. And I mean, one of the deals in which the ways in which you deal with complexity is with simplicity. So those simple reminders can create powerful ramifications as people get more and more of those.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me take another question. This one's intriguing. What do clients think of the use of technology in coaching? And maybe Allison, can I start with you? What do clients think of the use of technology in coaching? Again, there might, just because we all think it might be intriguing, maybe the clients aren't so intrigued as we are. What are your thoughts, Allison?
Well, one thing just to clarify, the Coach Now program, where we have used technology to really sort of support and enhance this coaching program, it's an internal program. So it's for our people. We're not actually using Coach Now with our clients.
Right. Well, and I understand. And would you say your internal clients have any reactions to that, to the use of technology?
Oh, sure. Internal. Yeah, I just want to be careful, because when we hear clients, we think of our clients who are people that we work with external to the firm. But yeah, internally, I think that they were excited by it. I think intrigued. I think it was something that they said, hey, this will really work well in terms of our day to day. I think one of the main reasons why we turned to utilizing technology is that we wanted to have an extra lifeline for our people. We rely on apprenticeship as our main way for our people to learn and grow and develop. And that's learning from somebody who's on their team and getting coached by them. And again, just given the fast pace of our work and the complexity of the external environment, we needed to find more and better ways to sort of strengthen that apprenticeship model. And this is another way to do it. And so technology, again, just makes it all, much easier. And so I think, people have been very pleased with it. If you think, though, about our clients as the coaches who are part of it, I did have some who were a bit skeptical at first, and I think really they were skeptical more about the 1 hour aspect of the coaching, the just-in-time coaching, and said things like, I'm not sure I can create the relationship I'd like to have in that 1 hour of coaching. But they've all come back to me saying, you proved me wrong. And I wasn't setting out to prove them wrong. But those are the things that they have said. They've said, people do show up. They commit to that hour. They're very focused on what they need to do and what they'd like to do with the coach in that time. So, overall, I would say it's been positive, even though we had some skeptics at the beginning.
How about David? Your thoughts on that? What do clients think? Have you had any different reactions?
I think people everywhere are getting used to technology changing. And every time there's a new technology, there's a hint of skepticism, like, see if it works. So people don't like clunky technology, but things that actually make their lives easier, they will adopt immediately. And so there's going to be a period in which some of these things are very clunky and not actually effective. And there'll be some geeky tech types who adopt them and play around with them. But at some point, people will be, looking at their smart watches and their smartphones and see a new feature and like, oh, let me try that. And when it works smoothly, they adopt it quickly. So I think that, adopting technology has started to follow a very consistent path. And when the technology is ready for large-scale adoption, it's going to happen very, very quickly.
Great. No, terrific. And Alex, any last thoughts on that? The role of tech, whether there's resistance, I guess. I can kind of, we can kind of understand the fear, the trepidation.
Certainly. I mean, as a coach, I run a technology company, but I'm also a coach. So I find those two perspectives very interesting. And I've had coaching moments where you really feel this connection to someone that enables these work to happen and this change to hopefully occur. in the person. And that feels like a very strong, uniquely human connection. So when we think about technology, we're not going to be replacing that in the near future, but as we start thinking about 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, is can we really replace that with technology? And I think the answer is ultimately yes, from a capability perspective of what technology can do as it develops. But we're also going to have to think about what sort of society do we want to live in, a society where machines take over certain human functions so that we can potentially be more effective and more efficient? Or do we want to live in a society that has some values around human connections and the human value that is added to society, where we protect certain things from being completely automated by technology? And perhaps the best path forward is a combination of both. And I think it's going to be a conversation between the people that have serious doubts, concerns, and the people that are all about it. And I think if we meet in the middle and we use technology in a conscious, deliberate way, we can potentially come up with a version of coaching and technology that makes everyone happy and enhances the impact and value of coaching.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And there's a lot of conversation around artificial intelligence in general in HR, not just in coaching. And certainly the concerns around confidentiality, the privacy, and then, if you want to skew it all the way to the other end, the Terminator movies type of thing. And, these are really serious concerns that, we all have. And just to your point, what the choice that we make as a society that we want to be in and that we want to live in, and what does that mean? So I think, not that we'll be answering, that's a whole nother webcast, but I don't think we'll be able to answer much of that. But I think these questions are being thought about by a lot of the individuals and the executives, in companies. This is not just a couple of scientists in a lab talking about this. This is HR leaders in organizations, maybe in yours, that are having these conversations and thoughtful conversations about what does it mean, what should we do?
That's a great example of complexity. Yeah. We're talking about these emerging topics, and we're seeing that they have a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different perspectives. So in the face of this complexity, how do we connect people to have the right conversations and hopefully find an outcome that is the best possible outcome?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I see a lot of questions around sort of what are companies doing. So I think that's the perfect transition to Allison. Can you tell us about this Coach Now program? Why did your organization choose to do this? And I'll come back to David and Alex also to talk about maybe other companies that you've heard about and what are they doing, how are they doing coaching and technology, and what are they blending with. But please, Allison, tell us a little bit about the program, the impact. Why did you choose to go down this path?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, we were looking for ways to really strengthen our apprenticeship model, and our people learn from one another on teams. And while we saw there was a lot of feedback happening, there wasn't as much sort of forward-looking coaching. And so we said, what are some opportunities for us to provide more coaching as close to that moment of need as possible? So we came up with the idea of Coach Now, which you can see on the slide, a couple of screenshots. But essentially, this program offers an hour of coaching when you need it. So you can go onto the platform either on your computer or through an app on the iPhone, and you can list out, sort of here's what I'd like to get some coaching on. There's a selection of topics to choose from. You can share your general time zone, and then based upon that, there's a matching algorithm, and you get back a set of coaches to choose from who you can connect with for an hour of coaching. What's so great about this is that it's just getting greater ease of access to coaches, and again, as close to that moment of need as possible. You can connect with them. Sorry, heard a little bit of feedback. You can connect with them through the platform. You actually, before you connect with them, you can read through the list of coaches and sort of read through their bios and decide who might be the best fit for you. And then you can connect with that coach. You set up a time to meet with them, have your hour of coaching by phone or VC, and hopefully get what you need out of it. I think we have seen that it has been very well received. We actually have surveys that we send to both the coach and the coachee following the coaching session, just to assess, did the coaching have an impact on the person's behavior? Are they sort of changing things, or, did they get what they needed out of that coaching session? We also asked the coach, how was it? Do you think it was, good value for time spent? And we've gotten great feedback on that. I often say that we look for, we have both the coach and the coachee fill out surveys, because we can't be, on that hour session or that hour coaching session. We can't be there. But we want to make sure, do we have a high level of sort of coaches or coaching that we're providing to our people? And, so far the surveys have shown us that. What's great, back to what Alex had mentioned earlier, we're getting a lot of data out of this. We're actually able to see what are some of the things that our people are looking for coaching on. Who are those people that are looking for coaching? Are there certain topics that are relevant for certain groups or roles of people at the firm? We've also been able to see, when are people using it? And it's actually quite interesting to see that, for some people, having a coach in your same time zone actually didn't really matter, because they were looking for coaching late at night, maybe at the end of the day. And so we're actually looking right now at maybe releasing that sort of constraint in our matching algorithm and just taking out the matching by time zone, so that it actually opens up the pool of coaches in terms of the opportunity to connect with so many more coaches. I should also mention that we use both external and internal coaches for this. And so we've got people who are, external to the firm, trained executive coaches. And then we've got a number of people who are internal to McKinsey, who are certified coaches themselves or particularly passionate about coaching. And they give of their time to participate in this program.
So Allison, just to be clear, so you match up for a 1 hour conversation, if you will, that you schedule yourselves, and that's pretty much it. Now you can kind of go ahead and schedule another session, but it's not always the case you would get the same coach, even if you talk about the same topic, and it could be, like seeing another doctor, if you will. Would you say that's accurate?
It is. I mean, you could certainly come back and find the same coach and meet with them again. But we are pretty clear that the design for this program was for coaching in the moment, and it is for an hour of coaching when you need it. And so this is not a long-term coaching program. We have other programs that offer longer-term coaching if that's something that is needed. And so this was a little bit different in terms of, let's see how this would work in terms of having that 1 hour of coaching. And what we've seen from the feedback, from these surveys that we send out after the sessions, is that it is working. And I think some of those coaches that I mentioned that were skeptical at the beginning, who said, I'm not sure if I want to do this, because I usually need a couple of sessions to build up a relationship. They said, you proved me wrong, because they found that our people have shown up very focused, and they're just, because they're so focused and in tune for that hour of coaching, there's a lot that can be done.
So I have some minor follow-up questions, because I'm thinking about this. So can you give us one or two examples of where someone is purposely coming in for short-term, just-in-time coaching, versus a long-term development? What are those reasons? Can you give us some reasons? And then we have a couple of sort of more tactical. Is this audio, video, both? Is it centrally charged? Who's paying for it? All of those wonderful type questions. If you can share some of your thoughts on that.
Sure. So it is by phone or VC, whatever is the preference for the coachee, I would say. They can really dictate that or decide what they'd like to do. In terms of the payment, so we do pay our external coaches. We pay them for the hour of coaching that they provide. So I don't have coaches on a retainer. I pay them. They invoice us for that 1 hour of coaching that they provide, or several hours, with different people. For our internal people, of course, they're internal. So it's them sort of giving of their time out of hide, I would say. So that works fine. One of the nice things about Coach Now is that it's so flexible for both the coachees and the coaches. I think that all of our coaches really appreciate the fact that they can sort of slot in this hour of coaching in between other clients that they might be working with, or, for our internal people, in between a very busy day where they're focused on other things and their full-time job is not as a coach. And so that's been one really nice thing. And I think that where we've actually sold it in terms of getting more coaches on board is this is a nice thing for them to do in that, hour of time that they may have here or there during their day.
Right. Last question, then I'm going to turn to Alex for other examples that he might know or be working with. How do you identify your coaches, Allison, build their profiles, their expertise? How are you sourcing your coaches? I know you mentioned you have internal as well as external. Are these the coaches you had worked with previously for your other coaching programs, or are they somehow different?
Yeah. So the external coaches were, I started out with, people that we knew from our own networks. I'm part of our internal McKinsey learning group where we provide learning and development for all of our people at McKinsey. And so we use a lot of external coaches, for some of our learning programs. And so I started with them for the external coaches. And then for the internal, it's been a little bit of just, connecting with people that I knew at the firm who were already certified as coaches. And then it's, they've introduced me to others. One of the things that we would like to do eventually is really build out our internal pool of coaches. And so one of the things I'm looking at is, perhaps we invest in doing some kind of coaching, training, or development for our internal people who may be interested in becoming coaches and really building their coaching skills. And we would invest in them with then the ask of them to commit some time to us. But so far, it's just been, I've actually had people reach out, the past week, I had 2 people just reach out to me saying, hey, I talked to, one of my other colleagues, heard about Coach Now. I'm a certified coach, would love to keep doing this. And, can we talk? And so that's really, how it's worked out is just a bit of word of mouth.
Okay. Definitely a challenging and interesting new approach, right, to take this on. So, Alex, if I could, maybe you have another story of how another organization might be using technology in coaching, either for the management of it, which I think we can sort of more readily understand, but or in different ways of how are they doing that?
Yeah, so at Coachlogix, we're in a very unique position where we work with coaches where they can manage their coaching practice through our platform. We work with coaching companies of all sizes, and we also work with large enterprise organizations. So we're able to hear from different perspectives on, what are some of their needs, what are some of what they would want in a technology platform, how do you bring all those people together? So I think we're very lucky to have Allison and David with us today, because there's certainly some of the most forward-thinking people in this space. The program that Allison was just mentioning, she's thinking about a lot of the things that I'm seeing across a lot of different other folks. So some people kind of come together with a lot of ideas and implement them. And what she's doing is really she's putting a lot of those ideas that I've heard from many different sources from people in organizations and really putting them together and trying to put a solution for the employees at McKinsey where they can really find these coaches in the moment and really have a good match, and really thinking about like whether the time zone should be part of the matching engine or not. I don't see a lot of coaching practice leaders tackling these sort of issues. So I definitely commend Allison for that work. And from our perspective, we're seeing a rise in the need for coaching in organizations, whether it's something like Coach Now, where it's in the moment coaching, or whether it's a more automated, more standardized way of managing kind of longer term coaching engagements. Organizations are wanting to open up their pools of coaches more to their employees so that you can go in and look for a coach and immediately just start working with that coach, or submit a request based on you looking at maybe 50, 60 options. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing, which when you really think at the underlying trend, it is really making coaching more available to more people. It is also standardizing the processes around coaching so you can gather better data, like Allison was mentioning. So I think those are really interesting developments in coaching in general, and they're all really dependent on technology. Not the technology we were talking about earlier around AI, but it's really about the core kind of management of those practices, which I saw a lot of questions and around privacy and confidentiality. And I think it's interesting to think about, what the role of a technology platform as far as coaching, from my perspective, should be to balance confidentiality and privacy of that coaching relationship, which the coaching should have this privacy and confidentiality element. But at the same time, organizations that are investing in coaching need transparency and accountability to be able to know what's happening within coaching so that they know that it's impacting the organization in a positive way, and they can continue to invest in coaching programs. And I do think that technology has a very specific purpose, or a sense of, I think it could be very helpful to do that. Yet we have to balance all those privacy issues we see across all companies today. We saw what happened with Facebook. So as you're collecting more and more data from your employees, you need to make sure that you're doing things based on best practices so that that data is safe and you use it in a way that is transparent. But if you do that right, I think that programs like Coach Now can be used across a broad range of other applications, and have it be a core component of how coaching programs are run in organizations.
Yeah. No, and I mean, the confidentiality, the use of data, the ethical use of data, I think, like I said earlier, I think that's a whole nother webcast that we should think about. But David, let me ask you sort of your thoughts, either at your own organization at Google or any other stories around organizations. How are some companies, are you hearing, are, if not actually implementing, thinking seriously about implementing some use of technology in coaching, and what are they thinking of?
Well, let's be clear when we think about technology, and Alex referenced, people using spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are technology. So they're using technology to schedule meetings, to track participation, to evaluate coaching, using technology to communicate, video conferencing. So coaching has already adopted all kinds of technological advances, and we don't even think about them very much anymore. And so anything that people can do to get access to information, search, videos. So I see organizations and coaches blending more of this. Let me send you a blog. Let me send you a video to watch. Why don't you watch this in the meantime? Let's use technology to record a meeting and then debrief it together. So it's fully embedded in the coaching process already. And with each new advance in tracking, measuring, communicating, access to information, we're going to see people adopting that. So I don't think there's a sense of, we have this new thing we're going to adopt. It's just constantly part of the evolution. And as I was saying earlier, as the tools get better in quality and easier and make life simpler, companies and coaches and leaders are just going to adopt them.
Yeah.
It's just how we operate today.
No, it's a fair point, which is that technology is already here, and it's just where, when, and how it will continue to evolve into our lives, and whether that's coaching or other parts of our lives. I think there's another question I'd like to ask the three of you and I think this one's a hard one. Have you noticed a difference in coaching, in the coachee's performance with technology versus human approaches in coaching? I don't know if we have enough data around that, whether we can even answer that yet in a broader sense, but I wondered if you had some thoughts around that. Again, sort of coachee performance with technology versus sort of the human approach. I mean, Allison, I don't know if you want to take that on first.
I mean, like you said, it's challenging, and I think this is something that we're constantly trying to figure out, is how can we assess the impact that the coaching has had on one's performance. Now, in our case, it actually is a human methodology, right? I mean, because we've got human coaches that are just being connected with, utilizing technology. So I'm not sure about an avatar or some kind of AI like chatbot coach. But I think that we're constantly looking at what are some better ways for us to assess the impact, because there's so many things, as you know. It's not just that, one coaching session that would have an impact on someone's performance. It is about their day-to-day experience. It's about other learning programs they're They're taking feedback that they're getting from someone on their team. So it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint, but we've been doing things like a sort of 100-day, sort of post-coaching session survey where we're looking at least the coachee self-assessing. Have they changed behaviors? Have they done something differently based upon that coaching session? So we're trying to take a look at that, but like you said, it's still early days.
Yeah, definitely. David, did you have any thoughts to add?
So one way to think about technology is how does it increase options for people? So early, if we go way, way, way back and look at technology, your origins of coaching were human conversation. Then you had a telephone, and people were thinking, oh, telephone-based coaching, that's not as good as being there in real life. And once people started doing the research on it, they learned that telephone coaching actually worked better for some people than live in person, where there was sensitivity or confidentiality or embarrassment kinds of things. And the same thing emerged with video coaching. Like, oh, it can't possibly be as good as really being in the room. But with high definition screens, immediate access, and it's almost like being in the same room. You can really read the nonverbal communication much more effectively. And so when people have the option of human, phone, video conferencing, soon virtual reality coaching, and they get to choose which one to use when, again, the adoption and the outcomes are much more positive. So technology, if it's inefficient, if it's glitchy, that's going to interfere with the coaching process. But where it adds options, it makes access to information, access to my coach, access to opportunities easier and simpler, people will just adopt it. And I don't think it has that much effect on overall outcomes, except probably using more technologies to increase the options enhances the time to achieve the outcome. So I don't think it's so much about the quality of the outcome or the degree of the outcome, but it enhances the speed to outcome much more.
That's a good way to think about that, actually. Yeah, yep. And I don't know, any thoughts around that, Alex, where, of course it begs the question, can an avatar coach be better? I think we're a little bit away from that to be able to answer that question, but your thoughts on sort of that performance impact.
So I'll shift it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I think about the coaching and the impact and how technology can, perhaps I'm not going to answer the question of how it can augment that or if it could make it better or it's going to be worse. What technology today can allow us to do is have better data and connect different data points from the performance reviews historically, how when coaching has been introduced for certain people, have they shifted, have those has that been a kind of longer term, has it had a longer term impact? So really starting to answer some questions that I don't think we really question, that we really post too much these days, and we don't have the data to be able to combine perhaps the data in an LMS with an HRIS system, and then looking at how coaching interventions allow people to improve performance across time. I think our ability to do that today is limited. So when I think about technology and the coachee in the short term, I think starting to blend data from different platforms will allow us to better understand what the impact of coaching, what is the impact of coaching today, and perhaps even historically as we can look at some archival data as well. So I think the use of technology today can help us start really understanding that in a much more complex and much more deep way.
No, I agree with that. And I think sort of one of the premises that we've all of us struggled with, how do you sort of evaluate the impact of coaching, period, with or without technology?
It's a whole other webcast as well.
It's a whole other webcast, absolutely. We're delighted to have you join us. We've always been challenged with that, but I actually believe, and I think all of us would agree, is that technology can actually help us get to answer those questions finally. Not Absolutely. Today, maybe, but pretty soon. Only with technology could we ever be able to answer that question. What is the actual impact of coaching?
That's what I was thinking when you were saying that. I think it's the only way where you can actually get the answer.
No, I completely agree with you. And those of us that have always been challenged to think that we'll never be able to answer that question of what is the impact of coaching, I think that's going to come pretty soon.
The holy grail of coaching?
It really is. I really think we're going to find that holy grail pretty quickly. So just in the interest of time, I realized that there were a lot of questions coming in from the audience, so thank you for that. We'll try to do a little written follow-up with some of the questions that maybe that we haven't gotten to today. I hope all of you are reflecting as much as I am on some of these comments from our esteemed panel. Clearly, technology has been in coaching for a while, so whether it's a spreadsheet or not, but those are, the technology keeps changing, and that's a challenge for all of us. Right? And you think about artificial intelligence, by the way, I've been on a little bit of a research journey about artificial intelligence in HR, and I also thought it might have been 10, 15 years from now, when we really will think seriously about AI in HR. And I have been surprised in the last 6 months or so as to how much AI is in HR today. And it's here and it's today, and that's been an awakening of myself personally. Being a researcher in this field, I'm always thinking about this, and I've been caught a little bit surprised at how much is in presence today. So is AI overwhelming coaching today? Not yet, but we're already seeing examples from McKinsey and Allison's story of Coach Now. There are definitely other companies that are doing it and are thinking very hard, are implementing and experimenting. And so I would encourage all of you to sort of go out there and have more conversations with your colleagues and your peers in your organizations. Think about and discuss how this would impact your organization, and could you try something? Could you experiment with something? And talk through the issues so that we kind of quell the Terminator movie fears in all of us, but approach this in some sort of thoughtful and intelligent way. So I thank you all for joining me on this webcast today. I want to thank Allison, David, and Alex. Terrific thoughts, terrific comments. So really, thank you all for joining me. And again, I'm Amy Abel from the Conference Board. Thank you again for joining us.